So I want to show you guys an alternative method for solving a system of equations on your calculator. As of right now, you've seen how you can solve a 2x2 system on your graphing calculator by graphing the two lines and finding the intersection point, which works perfectly fine. However, the issue comes in when we get into 3x3 system where we have three equations and three unknowns, and we get into three-dimensional graphs. And your calculator does not do three-dimensional graphs. So we have to use this alternative method for checking our work on the calculator. So the way we're going to solve, we're going to use this example right here where it says using the calculator to solve. And the first step is when you look at your calculator, right in the middle, right next to your math menu, it says apps. You're going to push the apps button. And then you're going to scroll down and you're going to look for an app that stands for Polynomial Simultaneous Equation Solver. And here it is right here. And so you're going to hit enter on that. And then this menu comes up where it says Polynomial Root Finder and Simultaneous Equation Solver. I'm going to hit enter again. And when you want to solve a system of equations, what you're doing is you're solving equations simultaneously. You're going to choose option number 2. And then when you get to this screen, you're going to plug in all your settings. So if you had two equations and two unknowns, you would have this highlighted on 2 and 2, and that's the case that we have right now. If you look at our problem, we have an x and a y, so we have two unknowns, and we have two equations. So I want to choose equations 2 and two unknowns, meaning two variables. If you have the option, leave it on fraction, and if it's possible to put the answer in fraction form, it will. And then what you're going to do down here where it says next, that next button is right above your graph button. So you're going to hit the button that says graph. And then what's going to happen is it's going to come up with something called a matrix. And this is where you're going to put in your coefficients of your x's, your y's, and your constants. Now, in order to put this in, you have to make sure your x's are lined up, your y's are lined up, and your constants are lined up, just like in all the previous examples. If it's not, you have to do that first. So this would be the coefficient for my x. Then if I scroll over, that would be the coefficient for my y, and then this would be my constant of the first equation. And then when I scroll down, the second row, that first square in the second row would be the coefficient of x, then the coefficient of y, and then my constant. So what you're going to do is you're going to start in the first box. My coefficient for x for the first equation is 2.92. So in this first box, I'm going to put 2.92. And then I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to scroll over. Then I'm going to put in my coefficient for y, which is the 2.92 as well. So I'm going to put in 2.92, enter. And then I'm going to put in my constant for the first equation, which is negative 1.34. Negative 1.34, and enter. Then it's going to drop down to the next line, and then I'm going to do the same thing and repeat, and I'm going to put in all my coefficients for the second equation. So I'm going to put in 2.78, enter, and then my next one would be 2.96, enter, and then 1.72 for my constant. Okay, once I have all the coefficients filled in for my matrix, then notice it says solve above your graph button again. So I'm going to hit my graph button to solve, and it's going to give me my value for x and y. This is my value for x. The calculator calls it x1 and x2. We're calling it x and y. But it gives it to us in fraction form rather than decimal form. And then here is our answer. Now let's go back and do one of the examples we did previously, and we can use this app to check our answer. So I want to go back to my system. The button right below where it says system, I'm going to hit that button, that's zoom, and it's going to take me back. And then I can go through and enter in all of my coefficients for the system. Now my x's are lined up, my y's are lined up, and my constants are lined up. So I make sure that I put them in the right squares in the matrix. So across the top, I have the coefficients -5, -3, and 12. So that's what I'm going to put in across here. -5, -3, and then 12. Then across the second row, I'm going to put in 4, 6, -6. Okay, so now once I have my coefficients in there, the button where it says solve, that would be my graph button. I'm going to hit graph, and it tells me what my answer is. This is my x. They're using x2, but we know that that's our y. So x is -3 and y is 1. And that certainly matches what we got when we did it by hand earlier. Now let's look at what happens when we have our special cases. I'm going to go back and change my system. So that's over my zoom button, so I'm going to hit zoom. And then I can put those values in again for my new system. So I have 4, 5, and 6 for my coefficients across the top. And then across the bottom, I have 40, 50, and -60. And if you recall, this system didn't have a solution. This was a special case of no solution. So when I hit solve, remember solve is above the graph button, so I'm going to hit graph. It's going to say no solution found. So that was the case where we had parallel lines and the system was inconsistent. Okay, now let's go back. I'm going to go back to the system, so I'm going to go to zoom. And now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do the other special case so we can see what that looks like. And I'm going to come down, and I'm going to put in 60 instead of -60. And then to solve, I hit above the graph button. So for this, because it's giving it to me as an ordered pair, like before, I know that it's infinite solutions. We wrote it down as the ordered pair x, comma, and then what the y value represented when we solved it for y. The calculator is giving it to us with the y, and then this solved for x. So it's giving it to us in a different form that we wrote down, but it's the same thing. So this would be the ordered pair that it was giving it to us as. And so this means anything that I put in for x2 for my y value, I would put in here and it would give me the corresponding value of x. So that is how you solve a system of equations that's 2 by 2. Now, if I want to go back later on when I want to do 3 by 3 systems, where I have 3 equations and 3 unknowns and I'm solving for x, y, and z, if I go back to the main menu, and that's above my y equals, so I hit the y equals button, I'm going to hit option 2 again. I got to go through the settings again now to set it up for a 3 by 3. So if I have 3 equations and 3 unknowns, I want to make sure that I arrow over and hit enter for 3 equations, arrow over and hit enter for 3 unknowns, and then go ahead and repeat the same process, but now I have more entries to put in because I have 3 equations, 3 unknowns, so I have 3 coefficients for each equation and a constant. and go through the same process of entering in the coefficients and the constants and hitting solve. So that is how you use the polynomial and simultaneous equation solver.